Welcome to the podcast that goes behind the scenes at Gloucestershire's premier art gallery and museum, the Wilson. This episode lifts the lid on our summer exhibition Radev, which tells the amazing story of Bulgarian immigrant Mattei Radev and his unique art collection, featuring works by Picasso, Modigliani and artists from the Bloomsbury group. Radev is a new exhibition that follows the life story of Mattei Radev, from penniless refugee to celebrated London art collector. It also explores the world of the Bloomsbury group and the friends who shared their art and their lives together across the 20th century. We caught up with curator Emily Beddoes to find out how the exhibition came about.
Julian Took, who is a local town councillor and a good supporter of the museum, and his partner Ognian Boychev, they were Mattei's friends. So it was their idea, purely their idea, and they came to us, and it's just a wonderful opportunity that we couldn't really refuse, especially as we were, after the museum reopened in 2022, we were looking to rebuild the programme. So yes, completely new to me, although despite the fact I didn't know Mattei, I knew many of the people I knew of the work of many of the people he was associated with, so it's quite easy for me to begin to place them out historically. And as I'm speaking to people, lots of people who feel they know art history have the same story, that they're like, I knew about Bloomsbury, but I didn't know about the Radev collection. I think that's really exciting. It's a sort of new discovery for lots of the visitors.
But finding a way to reconcile the breadth of the collection with Mattei's life story initially proved a challenge.
It's a really meaty story with loads of different angles. So I was quite overwhelmed trying to think of how to tell this story. The artworks span loads of different art movements, but unless you want to, I think previously when it's been shown very much with a view on exploring art history, which we do in this exhibition. And part of me was looking at that and thinking, how do we connect that to our audiences? How do we connect it locally?
Things fell into place when Emily met Mattei's partner and the collection's current custodian, Norman Coates.
Hearing from Norman, he's brilliant. He's a really lovely and charismatic man who tells wonderful stories about the sort of interesting times of the people. And it became really clear to me early on that they were a family, and it hadn't been shown as a family.
With the concept of family as her reference point, Emily began to build an exhibition around Mattei's amazing life story.
Mattei was born in Plovdiv, a small village in Bulgaria, or just outside Plovdiv, in 1927. His dad was a Macedonian migrant who literally just sold water to people and then started selling things door to door, created a whole business and bought vineyards and did well for himself against the odds. Then when the Communist Party took over, they seized land and he refused and was named an enemy of the state. So that sort of put a target on Mattei and his family. Mattei, also knowing he was gay, realised he had two targets on him, and he knew he wasn't safe and he had to leave. He made his way to Istanbul with some friends, then from Istanbul stowed away on a boat to Glasgow, was arrested, and we've got a letter he wrote while stowed away on the boat for 4 days, and was eventually found on the boat, was given safe passage through brilliantly blagging that he was expected at Whitehall because he had the card of a former lover who worked at Whitehall. So through luck and brilliant charm, arrested, imprisoned for about 2 weeks, and then made his way to London, where he met a man called Patrick Trevor Roper, who was an eye surgeon and a vocal supporter of that gay men live normal lives, which seems like a mad thing to have to say now, but at the time that was an incredibly brave thing to have to do. And Patrick Trevor Roper found Mattei somewhere to live with an artist called Robert Wellington, and through Robert Wellington, Mattei met the sort of cultural elite of London at the time and was deeply loved and looked after.
Norman Coates takes up the story.
Mattei endeared himself to a lot of people quite early on and met the cream of London art world, staying in Regent's Park, where he actually stayed for 10 years as a lodger. I think a lot of all these people were 10 or 20 years older than Mattei. You know, gay men have paternal feelings, but they just don't have children. Certainly didn't then. And I think Mattei just came across as a kind of vulnerable, delightful person. Eventually, one of the artists that he met was Robert Medley, who said to him one day, listen, I've got an exhibition coming up, just a quick exhibition. Can you do woodwork? And Mattei said, well, I'm the son of a farmer. I can sort of saw and nail things. He said, can you make some frames for me? So Mattei said, well, we can give it a go. And so they bought moulding and a few essential tools. And when Robert Wellington and the household was away for the weekend, Mattei built his first frames on the kitchen table. And that was really the beginning of how Mattei became a picture framer.
Living and working with Robert Wellington brought Mattei into contact with many leading figures in the 1950s London art world.
Well, Robert Wellington was a most extraordinary friend, but he met Eddie Sackville-West there, Edward Sackville-West, and he met Eardley Knowles. And Eardley, in time, would become his most dearest and closest friend of that generation, of this early friendships.
As Mattei's social horizons expanded, he became friends with a number of artists, including Duncan Grant and Vanessa Bell.
Vanessa Bell was terribly fond of Mattei, and Duncan was, of course, and Duncan would often pop into the shop that Mattei was now running in the West End, picture framing. So he was sort of drawn into that world of Bloomsbury as well.
So I've often enjoyed the Bloomsbury Group because of their beautiful aesthetic. I also love the gossipy stories related to it all. So it's made me feel, even though what the Bloomsbury Group were doing, trying to find new ways to live, is brave and wonderful, it's made me really feel for the complexities of living like that when society did not want you to. So it made me feel a lot more, it's allowed me to have a more 3D view of the Bloomsbury Group as people, whereas I think we often present them as caricatures, and I could probably be as guilty of that as anyone else.
Reframing the collection through the domestic worlds of Mattei, Eddie and Eardley gave Emily license to explore the network of relationships that brought these traditional outsiders together.
They're all unusual people, and I love that. And it's even though the Bloomsbury Group and much of this is told from a position of massive privilege, I can see how vulnerable they each were. Eddie had really chronic skin condition and was hypersensitive. To be honest, I would read much about Eddie as potentially being on the autism spectrum because he was obsessive and hypersensitive and sometimes had difficult relationships, but he had deep relationships and he was just complex and unusual and wonderful. And Eardley was, Norman tells me, would often struggle to express himself. Again, like when he would have overwhelming emotions, he would exit the room, which is very much a product of his time. He also had a true love of his life in Frank Coombs, who died during the war, so he's got a story of tragedy. And Mattei, well, as we said, has just got the most astonishing and unlikely story. They're all amazing and fascinating.
Emily began to look for a way of exhibiting the collection that could more fittingly reflect the stories and characters of its three owners.
So I worked with my colleague Meg, who does a lot of the design element, and we worked together to bring together a visual that reflects the concepts I've developed, and we wanted to look at, I told her I was interested in looking at these homes.
But reproducing the unique stylings of these Bloomsbury interiors in a public gallery came with its own problems, as the Wilson's Public Programmes manager, Megan Humphreys, explains.
They're amazing spaces, our second and third floor gallery, really simple spaces which lend themselves to all sorts of different exhibitions. But I guess one of the challenges is that particularly the third floor is huge and the ceilings go almost 6 metres high. And I think sometimes when you do a low hang of artwork, and if some of the artworks are quite traditionally small, they can end up getting a bit lost in that space. Emily was really talking so in such an exciting way about all of these amazing homes that Mattei spent a lot of his time in. And when I got to see them for the first time, I was just like, wow, this is a bit of me. These are amazing. I love interiors. But I was like, well, I think what we need to do in this space is that it is quite brutalist. It is concrete. We need to really soften it, and we need to find a way to make it feel domestic. And that's where that idea of the huge drapes came in. We knew that we wanted to talk about 4 different houses, so we thought, why don't we use draped linen in the space, almost 6 meters high, to create 4 homes within the gallery.
Fabric is often a good way of bringing in softness and homeliness. The colours of these fabrics are taken from the artworks, but also reflect the interiors of the homes. So yes, this is a kind of practical thing, but it also that allows us to draw out the space, but it also has a impact on how you experience the space. We wanted it to feel different from downstairs, and that as we're sat here in this, it makes it feel more cosy.
A further element in the staging of the exhibition came when Meg found an opportunity to meet designer Luke Edward Hall.
Luke Edward Hall was doing a reading at Cheltenham Festival. Yeah, we just thought he's fit so well with this project. So we grabbed him at the end of the Lit Fest. He's probably a bit annoyed because we just literally jumped in. And we were like, we're doing this, we've got the Radev collection. And he was so sweet and just said, oh, it looks amazing. I love all of this work. This is great. I would really love to be involved. And we couldn't believe it. We were so happy because we just thought it would be really nice to bring a contemporary artist designer into the space. One that really loves like the Radev, the work in the Radev collection. So we started chatting to him about what that could be, and he was like, well, why don't I recreate an interior domestic scene within the 3rd floor gallery, a bit of discursive space where we could have lots of learning materials, even a bit of drawing, a chance for feedback, and then we kind of like went from there. And Luke was amazing. We sent him, we sourced furniture, a lot of it with kind of a bit of a nod to arts and crafts, and we sent it to his studio, and he hand painted all of the furniture in his style, but you can see how it's so inspired by Bloomsbury. And then he brought it in and he started painting the walls, the floor, and it all came together to create that lovely like scene. And I think what I love so much about it is when you read about Bloomsbury interiors, they are referred to as some of the first upcyclers of their time. And I kind of love that. They would take something that was seemingly slightly maybe dull or what they didn't like, and they would just take the paintbrush to it. And that's where you see all of these, like the magic of all these interiors, particularly like in Charleston.
Telling Mattei's story also provided opportunities to work with local creatives and artists.
When we first kind of were talking about Mattei's story and how incredible it was, how he was a stowaway in a boat, the first thing that came to my mind when I had a conversation with Emily was, well, how amazing would it be to kind of really tailor his story for a children's audience? So we really thought, oh, how can we do that? And that's where we also start to have conversations about like, oh, who could we partner with? Potentially, we could write a children's story. What could that look like?
Meg contacted illustration course leader Kim Hall for her students' creative input.
When Meg came to us about the Radev show and talked about they want to do this children's book about the story of Mattei, it just seemed like a great project for our students. It's just the kind of things that we want to do. We want to support this project that uses images to tell a story. And in this case, having it tell to children became a really nice new layer of stuff that we hadn't done before.
With Luke's and then this kids book, we wanted to like make a space that wasn't just for somebody that's a real art enthusiast, fine art enthusiast. It could be like at an entry-level place, really good for a family to come into, or with Luke's element, somebody that's really into like interior design.
As well as producing the book, Kim is running workshops using ceramics and fabrics to share the Bloomsbury aesthetic.
You know, so much of how they wanted to live was forbidden or not allowed. And to find ways to do that, you had to find the joy, the lightheartedness, you know, the pleasure in that. And I think that's something that we all need more of now. So the idea of the workshops is to sort of share some of that and think about, you know, how the things that we put in our home, if you make them, they suddenly become much more meaningful and they can bring some of that joy in your day-to-day.
Since opening at the beginning of March, Radev is an exhibition happy to share its joy with audiences of all ages.
I hope it will help people see us as a national standard arts destination and a place that is, as I was saying, is we were doing lots of community engagement projects, a place that is for everyone to come and it's free, and a place to escape for a while.
Emily's done a fantastic job with the storytelling, and I think like some people might have heard of the Radev collection, but I don't think anyone will have really seen it contextualised by this kind of this queer love story, this migrant history story that runs through, and I think all of these different things that play into it make it really like, oh yeah, a wonderful visit.
For Emily, this success is also testament to Norman Coates' willingness to share Mattei's story with the world.
Norman was very trusting, which was lovely, but I absolutely adored working with him. He deeply cares about the collection and how it's presented. He deeply cares about how people understand Mattei, but he also had trust in us that we could do it, that we were, you know, we had the experience to do it. Whenever I do exhibitions, I think about the public. I've often co-curated exhibitions, so I'll be thinking about my co-curator's needs, but this is the first time I've ever curated a show when one of my main considerations is an audience of one person. So I desperately wanted it to be something that Norman felt proud of and felt reflected Mattei's story. So he has been involved. He's not been at all controlling, but he has been very inspiring.
It is a difficult thing. What do you do with your stuff? So much stuff is so ugly and horrible that one has to live with it, you know, things. But these gentlemen had an eye, they were high-minded, they wanted beautiful things, they admired beautiful things, they thought about things. So what they had a lot of was rather beautiful things, and I'm very lucky to be looking after them, and one day I have to decide where they go.
Thanks to Emily, Meg, Kim and Norman for their help in making this podcast. Radev continues at the Wilson until the 1st of September.